Long exposure is a technique often used by professional photographers to depict motion or to get a more creative look in their images. But you don't need to be a professional to use it. It's actually pretty easy. So let's head out and do so. Okay. So there was a typhoon earlier this week, so the game plan for today instead, we're going to rappel down, going to that island over there. So it looks like they took away the rope, helping me get down here, and then cross over to the opposite side of the island where there's going to be a lighthouse. And as you know, landscape photographers love lighthouses. And today we're going to do some long exposure seascapes because I haven't done that in a while. One thing about long exposure seascapes or landscape photography in general is that you really need to align your shooting goals with the weather. Weather or the tide conditions are something we can't control as photographers, so we need to adapt and make informed decisions. Questioning life decisions. It's not always going to be sunny, colorful days, so you know what they say when doing long exposure seascapes. When the wind's howling, the seas be swelling. No one says that. Finally saw the rock pools and the lighthouse over there. Time to find some compositions. While I'm taking photos of this lighthouse and finding my compositions, just very quickly, what are the gears that you need for long exposure photography? And of course, the first one is a camera that allows you to drag the shutter speed to your preference. This could be from fractions of a second to as long as the minutes. And your choice of shutter speed is going to dramatically change the way your image will look. For example, a fraction of a second will just introduce motion blur in your frame. But if you drag that shutter speed to very long periods of time, for example, a minute or even more, then it's going to smooth out all movements completely out of the frame. The second gear that we're going to talk about is going to be neutral density filters. So what ND filters do is that they block out incoming light to your camera sensor. Think of it as sunglasses to your camera, and this is going to be especially useful when you still have some abundant light in your backgrounds. So for example, right now it's still way before the sunset, and a normal exposure is going to be still around 1/160th of a second, so not even close enough for long exposure. Using ND filters will make your camera compensate for that reduced amount of light by extending your shutter speed. Another useful filter I have is going to be a polarizing filter, and what this filter does is that it reduces the reflected light within your frame. It's not completely necessary, but it does make a lot of difference if you want the best photos possible, especially when you're shooting around water. The next one is because we're dragging out our shutter speed for long, we need our camera to be very stable. So another essential is going to be your tripod. So the last gear that we're talking about is a shutter release cable, because we want to minimize the amount of time that we're touching the camera. So keep your hands to yourself. And the tiniest amount of camera shake is going to ruin your photo. So using a shutter release cable will minimize this. It's not completely necessary if you can set a self-timer to your camera so that it allows your camera to stabilize before it takes the shot. Now let's find some compositions. So in terms of my camera settings, whenever I shoot seascapes or waterfalls, I do tend to just use fractions of a second. Right now I'm just on 1/5 of a second, or play around with 1/4 or 1/3. And I don't need really long exposures because I don't want to smoothen out completely the waves. And another reason is because I think whenever the waves pull in and out of the frame, those white streaks can form nice leading lines, leading your eye towards the background, which right now there's some yellow tint in the sky and some nicely formed background islands as well. So I want those to be the ingredients within my compositions. And another tip when you're shooting some seascapes, because the formations of the waves can appear very random, don't settle for just one frame. Take as many photos as you can, because different patterns can actually affect your composition by a lot. So in these cases, do use the spray and pray approach. So the waves started to become really crazy. It's actually amazing, but I'm also low-key trying not to get submerged into the water. But yeah, I think long exposure today was a good choice, considering it's quite cloudy. I don't think we'll see a very colorful sunset later, but these seascape shots, I haven't done these in a while, so I'm quite satisfied with the experience today. Just the composition, of course, foreground, crazy waves, and then background going to be the islands at the back, and then there's some passing boats around, which probably adds a bit of interest. But now I'm just really focusing on the crazy waves So unexpected. This image was the first shot I took that day that made me think that the long steep hike getting down to the coast was well worth it, as the waves pulled in intensely in the foreground, sweeping your eyes towards some ominous grey clouds, but still feeling hopeful about the color pop of the sky. I also took vertical compositions with a stronger rock foreground interest, which was okay, but not having greater impact as the power station in the background was quite minute. Having realized this, I turned to a stronger subject. Okay, so right now, I'm kind of just photographing the background landscape. Trying to find a composition for the lighthouse. So I do think the compositions will be good over here if the waves can become crazy again over here. And as you can see in the background, there are some hikers playing around within the lighthouse as well. So let's see if the waves will go crazy again on this part. And it should turn out to be a nice shot if they do. And they actually did. So as I said, I just composed for the lighthouse to be close center and then sprayed and prayed for some interesting wave patterns. Sorry to the hikers that I magically removed, but they were a little bit distracting as I was editing them. Though I retained one which included them in case it added to the realism of the photo. Let me know what you think. Should I remove them or should I just keep them in the photo? This part of the view, there's a bit of some sea haze making it very, very soft in terms of contrast. And then with the backlighting, it kind of looks dreamy, to be honest. I wasn't expecting to like this shot, to be honest, but I was wrong. I had to use the crop mode of my A7 III as I didn't have my telephoto with me and 70mm was not long enough. But the minimalistic framing and beautiful glow of the light with some moody layering made it appear very cinematic. For these photos, I switched on to my 16-35 ultra-wide angle lens because I wanted to capture this lighthouse and also include the yellow hues in the sky over there for the golden hour. So I think it's a balanced enough frame to take a photo. Just shooting it handheld though because the waves calm down a bit, so I think doing some long exposure over here isn't going to work anyway. I don't want to be burdened by using a tripod and setting up the shots. So status update, the tides caught up to me and my feet are completely submerged. It's mushy and wet. So I'm going to take that as a sign to wrap off early. So hopefully you enjoyed this quick video about long exposure seascape photography. And if you did, why don't you check this video out? I think you're going to enjoy it too. See you there. Thanks for watching.